Hearing.
It's going. It's going.
Okay. Good morning. Today is Friday, January 7th. It's 8:30 a.m. and this is a meeting of the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee. It's Friday of our first week back, and we have been spending the week coming up to speed on things that have been happening while we've been out of the building. One of the major initiatives of this committee last year was our work on weatherization, and happily enough, the team outside the legislature that's been our partner for now 18 months continued its work through the summer and fall. And we're going to be hearing from people about what's been going on to help us continue to develop that program and bill and be ready to take further steps this session. So it's a real pleasure to welcome back our partners, Neil Lunderville, Richard Fazey, Dan Reilly, Maura Collins, Sarah Phillips, and let me look, make sure I'm not leaving anyone out. Did I say Maura Collins? It's like we did. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming back. Good to see you all. And with that, I'd love to turn it over to Mr. Lunderville to kick us off and on Weatherization 2.0 here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you this morning. I want to just share my screen, if I may. Let's see if I want to make sure folks can see this. I'll share. Are folks able to see? Okay, good. Thank you. Yes. Good. Well, for the record, my name is Neil Lunderville. I am I'm one of the three co-chairs of the EAN Weatherization at Scale Network Action Team. My fellow co-chairs are Richard Fazey from Energy Futures Group, who you'll hear from later today, and Kara Robacek, who is with EAN. And today we're going to talk about, I should also say that my day job is as president and CEO of VGS, Vermont Gas. And by way of introduction, before I was at VGS, I also led Burlington Electric Department for 4 years, and I've served other roles in state and local government. And I've worked with many of you, and it's such a pleasure to be back to talk about weatherization after all the work we've been doing over the last couple of years on this. Today, my role in today is to give an overview of who we are as an EAN Weatherization Network Action Team coalition, talk about the work that we've been doing, talk about the benefits of weatherization, just review some of those, and then touch on some of the work that we need to do. Certainly, Dan and Sarah and Maura are going to get into more details on workforce, energy coaching, and our on-bill financing approach, now called WRAP, in a lot more detail. I won't get into those. And Richard's going to talk about the weatherization policy and some of the recommendations of the team. But I'm going to try to put out an overview and pull all the parts together to give a framework for this discussion this morning. So let's just start with number one. Like, what is this weatherization at scale, and why did we come together around this? So when we talk about weatherization at scale, we talk about this really simple but ambitious goal, and that's to weatherize 120,000 homes, particularly homes for low and moderate income Vermonters, by the end of this decade. When we say 120,000, that's total. The gap that remains is 90,000. So we've done about 30,000. We want to do another 90,000 by the end of this decade. We know that our coalition came together because we know that there's a lot of things that go into being able to get 120,000 homes done by the end of this decade. Funding is one part of it. Finance is another. Workforce is a third, but there's also energy coaching. There are innovative approaches to weatherization and thinking about how we do this ultimately at scale. And our coalition brings together all those partners. So over time, we first came together in the summer of 2020, and we did a pitch for the EAN summit last year. We were one of the selected pitches, and we've had a kind of a snowballing effect. We keep adding coalition members. So you can see it, I won't go through this whole list, but you can see that our coalition is broad and deep, and it runs across the board. Certainly, there are a lot of folks working in the energy space here, which makes sense. We're principally talking about, when we talk about weatherization, we're often talking about reducing the amount of energy used. But there are other groups like Preservation Trust of Vermont, VNRC, VHFA, which is a really important partner as we think about the importance that weatherization plan housing affordability. This coalition is strong because we all understand the value and the benefit of weatherization. So I want to just talk a little bit about how we organize our work, and because I think this helps put together the framework of thinking about the whole range of weatherization activities. So our group, our coalition, meets about once a month, and we hear reports out from our work groups. Our work groups are where a lot of the real action lies in this effort. They are leading individual pieces of this. So, for instance, we have a weatherization repayment assistance pilot, also known as the on-bill tariff or on-bill financing, that's led by VHFA and VIPSA. And today, Maura Collins will talk about that. We've been so delighted to have VHFA as part of our coalition. They brought new ideas and fresh energy and really cemented this link between housing affordability and weatherization, which we've all known about, but we've been able to work together and find some really innovative new ways to approach this. There is energy coaching, and the effort has been led by Sarah Phillips of the Office of Economic Opportunity and her great team there. Of course, they manage the weatherization assistance program for the state, which helps the lowest income Vermonters with weatherization. We all know that energy coaching is a critical element of getting Vermonters signed up to do weatherization and walking them through this, which is not always really turnkey. There are a lot of elements to it that Sarah will talk about today. It wouldn't be complete if we didn't talk about workforce, the workforce needed to do weatherization. One of the long-standing advocates and great partners in this is Efficiency Vermont. Their whole mission is efficiency, and they've been a leader in thermal efficiency for decades. Dan Reilly will talk about the work that EVT led at the legislature's request around workforce this year, and talk about some of the things that we need to think about to make sure that we have a workforce for weatherization for the future. We're also going to talk about the sort of where weatherization fits in the overall policy space in Vermont. Richard Fazy from Energy Futures Group will cover this and talk specifically about some of the recommendations that our coalition has made to the Climate Action Plan, the Climate Council through their Climate Action Plan, and the Comprehensive Energy Plan. There's one other work group that we have currently that I want to touch on here, and maybe the committee will have them in at a later point, and that is the Technical Approaches Group. This is something we added just in the last 6 months or so. Technical Approaches really focuses on how we're doing the work of weatherization on the ground. And Enrique Bueno, affiliated with Vermont Passive House, and Alex Tolstoy, affiliated with the Preservation Trust of Vermont, are co-chairing this group. They're really looking at, are there new innovative methods to doing weatherization on the ground that take into account Vermont's older housing stock and the need to also move weatherization quickly, possibly using some of the methods that have been pioneered overseas, especially in Europe. We think there's a lot of interesting work coming out of the Technical Approaches Group. We won't cover that here today, but I wanted to mention that's an important part of the work that we're looking at as well. So let me jump into the meat of my presentation. Let me start with why we are so passionate about weatherization. We are passionate about it because we know that it works. We know that efficiency works. It's been the bedrock of our energy policy in Vermont for decades now, because we know the greenest and most affordable energy is that which you don't have to use. And weatherization really just brings energy efficiency down to the residential level, where we're doing deep energy retrofits for homes, apartments. So this covers both homeowners and renters. We need to make sure we cover both, so that we are bringing energy savings and a whole host of other benefits to them. Importantly, weatherization is a strategy that complements a whole host of other public policy goals that the legislature and the administration and the state overall are looking at. It complements housing, it complements health. It certainly complements our energy and climate policy, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So then when we do weatherization, we're really doing something that we have no regrets about. There are very few, if any, unintended consequences about doing weatherization. So I'm going to talk about the benefits in just a moment, but it's important to note that we've been attracted to weatherization. We're passionate about it because we also know how it helps low and moderate income Vermonters. It's one of the things where we can bring some real equity in this climate transition that we're going through. When we do weatherization for low and moderate income Vermonter, they're getting immediate benefits from this. And importantly, they're participating in the work that we need to do in the fight against climate change. And it's one of the ways that they can participate right out of the gates. They don't need an electric car, they don't need solar. They could have right there in their home or apartment, they can be weatherized and they can get those benefits and be part of this. So it supports an equitable and just transition for these groups. It's also important because we do talk about weatherization in the climate framework a lot. I wanted to say right out of the gate that we think weatherization is part of the two parts needed to really address how we reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the thermal sector. The weatherization effort is perfectly complementary to the clean heat standard effort. We've actually worked really closely with Rich Cowart and Chris Nemi and their group to think about these as two halves of one whole package. Because weatherization and fuel switching are highly complementary. They really have to work together. When we're able to fuel switching away from fossil fuels works best when homes are weatherized, because we're able to reduce the overall energy usage, which makes it cost effective to switch to renewable fuels. So these things really, really go together, and that's an important point. So what are these benefits? I think the committee probably knows these, has heard these before, but it is important to just talk about them again briefly. The first thing, and I think the thing that probably attracts most Vermonters to weatherization, is it can reduce energy bills by 20% on average. Now this ranges from somewhere between 10% and 30%, depending on the comprehensiveness of the energy retrofit that's going on, the weatherization that's happening in the home. But these savings are a real affordability measure, especially for those low and moderate income Vermonters. So this is, I think for a lot of Vermonters, they think about weatherization, they think, I can save money, I can put money in my pocket right away. And that's true, but it's not the only story. One of the other big stories is certainly the reduced greenhouse gas emissions. We are really lowering that, reducing that carbon footprint. But there are other energy benefits as well. As I mentioned, it supports transition to renewable thermal because of by making it more cost effective to use renewables. And it also improves resilience during energy disruptions. By having a tighter home, one that leaks less energy, we know that home will stay warmer longer and for cheaper, which is something that's really important. That's not all. Housing affordability is a critical part to this, as Maura will talk about today. When Vermonters are spending less on energy, that means they're spending less on their housing. And so when we think about the housing challenges that we face in Vermont, we want to make sure that weatherization, having tight homes, is part of that conversation. When we can reduce the cost of maintenance for a home and reduce the energy cost, we're really improving the affordability of that housing. For homeowners, we're also increasing the value of their home. So we're helping them build wealth by doing weatherization, which is another kind of critical element of this. The final part I'll mention, and it is sort of an area that's growing in our minds, is the health benefits of weatherization. There are a lot of studies that are out there showing that when you weatherize a home, you're actually improving the health of the occupants of that home. You're having cleaner air, it's sort of less drafty, it's warmer. So when we improve health outcomes, we're also lowering the cost of healthcare, and we're improving comfort. You know, at VGS, a lot of the folks we talk to about weatherization say, I just want to be warm in my home. Which I think is something that every Vermonter has the right to be able to say. I want to be warm in my home. So let's not forget home comfort is a really important thing when we think about weatherization. So we put it in this bubble chart because we want to say there's a lot of parts to this. And it's one of the things that makes weatherization such an important strategy for us in the years ahead. So when we think about weatherization, we think about it as an investment, because it is a capital investment. You need to put a slug of money in up front to start drawing down the savings and benefits that come from weatherization. We know on just the economic savings from energy bills, we know that for every dollar we invest, we return $1.50 in energy bill savings. We're not even quantifying the health savings, the carbon savings, et cetera, that go along with this. So that this is an investment that pays returns, and it pays dividends right away. But as we do know, as we all know, when we have such big goals, this 120,000 target that we have, which we really need to do, there is a gap to how from what we're spending today to do weatherization to where we need to spend to hit that. And it's a sizable gap, but it's also one that we can do through multiple sources. And we have a real opportunity this session with the availability of ARPA money to make a massive first step or bigger first step on this. I think from our view, we don't think there's going to be any one thing that fills this gap. There's going to be a lot of things, and they're going to change over time. So ARPA money is an important big step, but there'll be other steps that will be needed over time to fill this gap. Other steps and other strategies. You know, for low and moderate income Vermonters, we really need funding because they do not have the ability to pay for it out of pocket. They don't necessarily have the ability to finance it through a credit union or a bank or even through other programs. So we need innovative methods, and that's why the on-bill financing is such an exciting way for us to be thinking about how we finance weatherization in a way that allows more low and moderate income families to take advantage of it. So
Mr. Lunderville, can I ask
yes.
a question on that last slide? The $1.50 for every dollar invested over a lifetime. What was how many years are you using for lifetime of the investment?
I mean, generally we look at about 20 years for this. I'm not sure exactly what this study looked at, but I will double check my notes and be back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we're going to kind of a couple of concluding thoughts on this. So one thing we do know is that with this gap, we need some certainty around funding. We are hugely appreciative of the work the legislature and the administration and the governor have done in recent years to deliver more weatherization funds. The legislature's appropriation last year was a huge first step in this. We've seen more money come in through the administration just in the last couple of months. The federal government has put more money in weatherization. I know the White House is made a big push on unlocking ARPA funds to bring to weatherization. All of these are critically important, and we still need to do more. We have a great opportunity, as I mentioned, with the available ARPA funding, which we think fits just perfectly into helping Vermonters with weatherization. And so that will be able to get us through the next few years. And we want to make sure that as we look out past the next few years, that we're also thinking about continuing the long-term stable and growing funding to meet our goals. We've heard from a lot of folks that the weatherization market needs this certainty. And this is a really important part of it. We have certainly been funding weatherization, but it has been up and down. if we look past over the last decade. And that up and down certainty, that up and down funding creates uncertainty. And what I mean by that is that the private sector who is really on the ground doing this work, looks at the state's funding for weatherization and says, I'm not sure if I should bring on another crew or 2 or 3 to do this work because I'm not sure the work is going to be there. By adding certainty to the market and by having this stable and growing funding source, funding for weatherization, that will send a clear market signal to the private sector to add crews, buy equipment, and then ultimately get the workforce in place for the long term to be able to meet our targets. It's not the only thing we have to do on workforce, but it is one of the most important things we can do on workforce is to put that funding certainty in place. Any commitment of ARPA funds over the next 3 or 4 years will make will be a huge step forward to bring that certainty. And so we certainly encourage the legislature to consider that. I'm going to let Richard Fazy get into more detail about these our recommendations and some of the innovative approaches that we are suggesting. But I wanted to leave the thought that certainty is a real important part of this.
Great. Thanks so much for that very helpful refresher on what's cooking. And just on your last point, part of the funding strategy for standing up this program was looking at 2 years of funds right out of the gate so that we gained a little bit of that steadiness. But I think I'm hopeful that what we'll do this year is then make commitments that carry us out 4 years. Yep. And that will buy time during that 4 years to help us build the financial foundation for the next 4 years. So I agree. It's easy for the legislature to underestimate the value of steadiness, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think this committee has already shown the foresight on having a multi-year commitment on weatherization, and we appreciate that and think it's critical going forward. I want to say that our Weatherization at Scale Coalition stands ready to assist this committee and anyone in the legislature or the administration to help advance these goals. We have as we saw before, we have a great and large team that is ready to jump in, educate lawmakers on this, do modeling, and importantly, our Weatherization at Scale group is sort of a workshop for these ideas. You can throw things over our way. We can work on them and help support these efforts. So I wanted to spend 1 minute. I would be remiss if I didn't mention with my other hat on just the efforts, the importance of weatherization to what VGS is doing. So I've mentioned to the committee last year that VGS launched our climate plan in 2019. And so we're entering our 3rd year of pressing forward to radically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in an effort to fight climate change, acknowledging that natural gas, fossil gas, is a contributor to climate change. So we have been doing a number of things to turn that back and turn it in a different direction. Weatherization has been our cornerstone. We've been a weatherization an energy efficiency provider for 30 years. Since 1992, we're one of the state's 3 energy efficiency utilities. And it's really the key for our efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. If we look at that top line of what we're doing, the first step is to take out energy usage. So reducing that through energy efficiency. And with what's left, we're looking at how we do renewable in-home solutions to reduce it even more. For instance, we just launched an electric heat pump water heater program to be able to install them for our customers in the counties that we serve. In addition to that, we're also looking at taking our supply of gas and changing that to something other than fossil gas. So last year, with partners, we kicked off a renewable natural gas project. We actually commissioned it. So we're flowing renewable natural gas made in Vermont from a farm in Addison County into our system. That's only one of many other ways, and I won't get into all those ways, but where we're growing alternative supply so that we can replace fossil gas in our system and have lower greenhouse gas emissions going forward, consistent with the Global Warming Solutions Act targets that have been laid out. So that's how it all fits together, and I wanted to just close on that. Happy to take your questions, but I certainly can save your questions to the end as well. Mr. Chairman, thanks.
On that on the VGS programming, can you, I'm guessing there'll be some people who'll be scratching their heads or wondering how it is that a company that's been a traditional fossil fuel company could be helping people reduce their use of fossil fuels. So can you say a little bit about your vision for the long-term evolution that might help people have a different appreciation for what Vermont Gas is aiming for?
Thank you. I will. At our core, we are a company that delivers warmth to our customers. We want to keep them warm on days like today. We want to make sure that they stay warm. It is really not that we have for the last 55 plus years. The principal way that we've done that is through serving them fossil natural gas, and which is cleaner than other fossil fuels, but still not clean enough, and certainly still is a contributor to climate change. So what we have said as a company is that we want to take the next step forward and deliver warmth to our customers with renewable sources. And that means using less energy. It means using different kinds of energy like electric heat pump water heaters. And it means changing the supply inside of our pipe. I mean, ultimately, we need to keep our customers warm, but we believe there are other ways for us to do it. VGS is probably a bit of an anomaly in the natural gas world, and that's okay with us. And we are a natural gas. We've been an energy provider in Vermont, which means that we are going to meet the needs of our customers, and our customers want to see their warmth served in more renewable ways. They also want to make sure that it's affordable. That's something that's part of the cornerstone effort. Cornerstone of what we do is foundational, is safe, reliable, and affordable energy. But we think we can do that in a way that's greener than we have in the past. And we think we can do it in a way that's consistent with where the state wants to go with the Global Warming Solutions Act and the targets that are laid out in there. We've been making great strides. I mentioned the RNG is just one of the things that we're working on. We're also working on a green hydrogen project. We're working on geothermal projects. We are looking at, as I mentioned, heat pump water heaters. There's sort of a range of things that we're doing with our 135 great employees who are there every day taking care of our nearly over 55,000 customers in Franklin, Chittenden, and Addison County. So we're going to keep pressing ahead on this. And we think there are a lot of ways we can partner to light the path forward for companies that have been traditionally natural gas companies who are changing the way that they're doing things. And we think we can do that nationally as well. And I think that's a good thing. And certainly we've been excited about our progress.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The other thing is, although we're really here to talk about weatherization, you mentioned the heating component, and we do have a Senate clean heat standard bill, although we're anticipating through our planning with the House will go first. But can you say a little bit about how that fits in for VGS and for others in terms of how that functions relative to the weatherization program?
Well, I think as I mentioned before, when we think of clean heat standard, we think about it right alongside weatherization. In order for a clean heat standard to work to its greatest extent, we need to be focused on first weatherizing homes so that they are as efficient as possible to be able to use renewable sources of energy. It's what makes those renewable sources of energy cost effective. So from our perspective, from the perspective of our Weatherization at Scale Coalition, we think Weatherization at Scale is joined very closely with Clean Heat Standard, and they have to work together. From a VGS perspective, we also think the Clean Heat Standard offers a very strong path forward to help us meet our climate goals. A clean heat standard will be hugely disruptive to our company, but it's the kind of disruption that we need in order to meet our goals. It's the work that Chris Nemi and Rich Coward have done through an EAN group has been inspiring work. It is a very complex proposal that has a lot of elements to it. We look forward to being very engaged in that effort because we think we can provide some perspective of how it will impact our customers and how we'll be able to deliver on it. So I'll save most of those comments for the future, Senator, although I'm happy to take other questions if folks have it.
Great. Well, thanks. I just figured it'd be helpful for us to start assembling another piece of the puzzle a little bit today, because although again, we're anticipating, for the most part, waiting for a bill from the House. We will do some work prior to anything coming to us, so that we'll be ready to, sort of use it, take it on well when it does get here.
Great. Thank you.
So does that bring us to Mr. Fazy?
I think we had, I'm going to just stop my share. We had, we could go in any order you like, Mr. Chair.
No, the floor is, you're all here as a team, so
I think
divvy up the time and sort of pass the baton however you wish.
I think we were going to go next to Dan Reilly with Efficiency Vermont to talk about the workforce and the EU's role in weatherization.
Great, thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Neil. For the record, my name is Daniel Reilly, and I am the Director of Public Affairs for Efficiency Vermont and for VEIC, and a proud member of the Weatherization at Scale Coalition group. I've submitted the full workforce report to the committee for posting on the website, so it should be available there. Neil's given an excellent overview of the landscape and of the coalition's work to date. So let me just dive right in. I'm going to go pretty quickly, and I don't have any slides. I'll turn it back over to folks far smarter than me. But as Neil said, Efficiency Vermont is a statewide energy efficiency utility. We are one of 3 EEUs, along with VGS and BED. Along with OEO, Efficiency Vermont conducts the bulk of the weatherization work here in the state. I'm happy to come back before the committee, do a deeper dive on sort of more comprehensive look at our weatherization efforts. But just to say at the top, our weatherization funding primarily comes through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and the Forward Capacity Market. And as I've said before the committee last year, that funding is projected to decline in the out years. And so the business as usual approach would lead to a decline in our weatherization funding going forward at this critical time. So with regards to the weatherization workforce report, as a reminder, last year, the committee tasked Efficiency Vermont with creating a weatherization workforce group that shall develop plans for the coordinated delivery of a standardized statewide building sciences curriculum that includes weatherization. So we were instructed that the curriculum shall be designed to establish a career pathway in the energy efficiency construction and shall include a certification that's broadly recognized, transparent, and portable. Now, I do really want to stress the specific nature of our task. Our task here was not to write a prescriptive document outlining the magic formula that would solve all of Vermont's weatherization workforce issues. This is a very big topic that a lot of folks are looking at right now. We were strictly looking at the development of a building sciences curriculum and establishing career pathways. That said, we're very proud of our work, and we do think it's an important contribution to the dialogue and can help us really address this critical problem. So Efficiency Vermont engaged over 50 stakeholders across Vermont in a 3-month sprint over the summer to develop this framework. Stakeholders included the WAP agencies, Preservation Trust of Vermont, Energy Co-op, Vermont Fuel Dealers Association, VGS, utilities like VIPSA, Vermont Technical Colleges, many, many others. We also surveyed weatherization contractors, the folks out in the field doing the work, workers, and training programs to fully assess the market need. We also surveyed these members upon completion of our work to ensure that the framework we developed met the industry needs and make sure we were going in the right direction. Let me just give you a very brief overview of the highlights of the report. So the curriculum and certification framework we developed, it had different certification tiers. It had learning objectives and core competencies. And we really developed a 5-tiered certification system: weatherization installer, apprentice, journeyman, expert, and residential HVAC contractor. And we found that this framework would offer market consistency in worker knowledge, skills, and abilities, while also accommodating existing and new training programs. Basically, you knew what you were getting if someone says, I'm an installer, I'm an apprentice, I'm a journeyman. The report also found that this framework would operate optimally with an agency of state or its appointed designee to serve as administrator. And that administrator really has two crucial functions, and that's maintaining two important directories. The first would be a weatherization and building science training program directory, so you know everything that's out there, and a professionals workforce directory, so you know all the different people that work in this field. And what's really, I think, of particular importance to this committee and this discussion, the report identified several key barriers to growing the weatherization workforce, really informed by the survey and by talking to the folks on the ground. And those key barriers we found were, number one, a lack of interest and knowledge of the trades in young Vermonters. Number two, a shortage of workers in general. Number three, wage competition. Number four, historical volatility in weatherization funding, as Neil touched on, really the importance of that market certainty. And five, a lack of affordable housing. I know you've heard many of these issues before, and I know these are some of the largest problems facing our state, but those were really the key themes that we heard over and over again. And so let me stop there. We know this will not be easy. We're well aware of the magnitude of the challenge before us, but I do think that this report and in this discussion today are important steps forward, right? I mean, admitting you have a problem is always a good first step. And so with that, I'll take any questions and open up the floor.
Okay. Any committee questions? All right. I do have one, and that is on that fifth bullet, lack of affordable housing. Is that for potential employees in this field? In other words, if you're not making enough money, then housing is not affordable. And then that gets back into the wage competition one that you were mentioning.
Correct. And the difference between salary and housing, right? I mean, in terms of salaries not being able to keep pace with housing costs.
Did you end up discussing with folks paying people to come to training? This session, since we were last together as a committee, my work this summer and fall was in the trades, and I can readily imagine how anyone who's making an hourly wage doing work would be reluctant to stop making that wage and go off to get some training. So larger employers might well pay for that training. I'm not so sure that the sort of landscape with many smaller crews, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 people, that those kinds of employers are apt to pay the wages of the day for the person who goes off to get the training. Did you get into how can you say anything more about how you would deliver and reach that target audience, people who need to work on those skills?
Yeah, it's a great point. As far as the specific responses in the survey and the report, I'd have to check. But Senator, I can tell you from sort of real world examples, back when Act 62 was passed 3 years ago, which redirected some funds to Efficiency Vermont for this purpose, we did pay people to attend a 3-day certification course, and those programs were oversubscribed, right? I mean, it was a small amount of money, a small scale, but we know that works, and we know the value of paying people for their time. So absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's both a practical aspect, like you need income, and then I think there's also in an economy, it's an economic world we live in. There's sort of a respect component when someone's remunerated for their time, even if it's modestly. It confers some seriousness on the whole venture. So thank you,
Mr. Chair.
McDonald.
Did Mr. Reilly, were you saying that you paid people to take the training?
To attend the training, that is correct.
Okay. I'm not surprised, and I'm glad you've made that leap. Thank you.
The other thing was one of the conversations we all had together last spring was around who can deliver these services. Can you say a little more about where you saw potential partnerships for delivering it, whether it's the tech centers or CCV or Vermont Technical College or all the above? What do you get into that? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, primarily we were focused more on the curriculum side rather than the delivery side with this particular report. However, absolutely, the technical colleges, the career centers are really a key part of that, and it's also really related to the barrier that the first barrier we acknowledged in terms of lack of interest in knowledge of the trades in young Vermonters, right? And that they really serve a key role there.
Right. Well, happily, I think the governor spoke very directly about this in his State of the State, addressing explicitly, I think, the notion that there's some stigma, a past stigma associated with directing people towards the trades, and that it's not a seamless system in the secondary level to go trades versus whatever traditional high school. And so it will be helpful. We know we have work to do to interest younger folks in the trades. So one of the things I would say is it's very helpful to have a curriculum in mind to coalesce around. And then if you're advising the committee about now sort of actualizing the kind of curriculum recommendations and turning them into real world training out in the field, can you speak a little bit to what you would make recommendations on or prioritize for next steps in terms of how we can, as a committee and as a legislature, support a more effective program?
Sure, absolutely. And part of this was the committee itself had that foresight last year when they also appropriated $2 million for training and certification, delivery, and program maintenance, and for the expansion of NeighborWorks of Western Vermont's Heat Squad program. And so that's a key part of that moving forward. Just to give you a quick update on that, Efficiency Vermont is currently working with the Public Service Department to finalize the proposal and that allocation of funding. The ARPA requirements do not fit easily with the development of workforce development programs, and so there's been some back and forth in terms of getting that right. We're optimistic. We're moving forward very, very quickly, and we intend to provide $1 million to support the work of NeighborWorks and that program. So that's a key component of that.
Great. Well, and as you know, Senator Campion is not only on this committee, but he chairs education. So I think this committee will want to follow up with him and look at that, the degree to which there's a more transparency, more accessibility, sort of a more seamless connection for kids in 9th through 12th grade in terms of having access and knowing more about a trades pathway. Okay. Mr.
If I may,
yeah, please.
Chairman, just this might be a good time as well too to note that the EAN, as part of the annual pitch process, did select the workforce development team this year as I believe the top vote getter, and so there is an EAN network action team that has been created and is actively engaged in exactly these issues as well. So there's certainly more details behind that, but there's quite a coalition of all of the interested parties that have been mentioned already, working actively on this really clean energy. It's broader than weatherization, but it's clean energy workforce development.
Right. Well, that's great. I'd forgotten that, so thanks for the reminder, and we can tie into that. I know there's a group of representatives on the House side looking at the same issue, and I think the legislature, there's also a group that's interested in broadband. I hope that at some point we can get into a more general strategic trades and professions mindset and not have to sort of scramble to meet particular programming needs, but have a framework that is always looking forward and saying, what do we need in the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years, and how can the program be adapted to fill a gap or a growing gap, or to meet to help us take advantage of an opportunity.
And just to summarize it, we've always said that this is a three-legged stool in terms of workforce development, direct incentives to reduce costs of weatherization, and financing. And in terms of, you're going to hear from Maura on a lot of the innovations on financing. We have this curriculum. There's a large conversation going on around workforce development at a very high levels in the state. But again, that incentives, like sending that market certainty, is a really crucial component of this to making sure all three legs of the stool are strong in order to achieve this ambitious goal.
Okay. I sense that this is one of the areas the committee is going to need to the things we identified at the outset of this session to work on are principally workforce, meaning those implementing in the field and those doing that kitchen table counseling, and then also the financing, whether it's the sort of near-term application of ARPA money or budgetary appropriations, as well as looking at financing innovative ways that we'll be hearing from Ms. Collins and others. So, okay. So this is right on target. Thank you.
Neil, let me throw it back to you.
Thanks, Dan. Great overview on that. And I think what we were thinking about for our next speaker is Sarah Phillips, and then followed by Maura Collins, and then Richard Fazy. If Sarah, if you're ready, I don't want to put you on the spot. Oh, okay, there you are. There you are.
Hi. Yes. Good morning. For the record, I'm the director of the State Office of Economic Opportunity in the Department for Children and Families, and our office administers the Low-Income Home Weatherization Assistance Program. I am having some incredible internet issues today. I do have some slides to share with you, but I may need to turn my camera off as well, only to be able to stay on testimony with you. So let me start by,
Sarah, can you send those slides to me as well?
I believe they were sent to you this morning. Apologies for the lateness of that.
Okay.
I believe
I'll look for them. Thank you.
I did send them. Yeah. Can you allow me to share my screen?
And if we need to, we can always switch to Jude could either show them from our screen, and you wouldn't have to have maybe quite so much bandwidth to do the screen share.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
All right. Looks good.
Okay. All right. So this is us. We're the Home Weatherization Assistance Program. Pretty basic, but just a basic reminder that our office has 3 staff dedicated to the Low-Income Home Weatherization Program, which blends together both funds from the fuel tax, funds from the Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Energy Weatherization Assistance Program, and then LIHEAP funds as well. We then push those funds out to now 6 organizations across the state, who then employ crews and subcontractors to go out and provide no-cost, comprehensive home weatherization to low-income Vermonters, from energy audit, energy renovation services. We also provide energy coaching for folks, and then we have a national award-winning program called One Touch that supports referrals and access to other health and human service programs. Last year, the program was about $12 million. Last year being state fiscal year 21, about $12 million for weatherization. We weatherized a little over 1,000 units. That's about a 20% increase from the prior year. Folks may remember that we had some pretty significant disruptions sort of in spring of 20 and summer of 20 due to COVID, right? So it impacted the program, and so that increase was sort of a push from the previous year that our program scaled up to try to make up for the previous year. Of those units that were weatherized, we kind of did a breakdown here so you could see that a little over 600 were single occupied homeowner units, and the rest were multifamily. Average program investment it was about $9,000. Energy savings in our program, because we do provide comprehensive home energy renovation services, it's usually upwards of about 30%. Last year was 28.7% based on our modeling. And of course, weatherization, in addition to putting money in people's pockets and being really great in terms of improving home health and also saving energy, is a part of our greenhouse gas reduction goals. So that's sort of a summary of results from last year. Some policy programmatic things that shifted last year for us. We continue to really focus on how to address deferral issues. These are issues that otherwise prevent us from weatherizing a home because they are major structural issues in the home, or, for instance, asbestos that contains vermiculite. And those things would otherwise prevent us from weatherizing the home, so they have to be addressed first. And we continue to pioneer and lead the nation in vermiculite remediation in our approach. And we have adopted an approach to really fully address deferral issues. We continued, you may remember a couple years ago, the legislature appropriated some one-time general fund to the weatherization program. We said that we would spend that over a couple years, and the primary way that we deployed those funds was to pilot a new way or a new provider in doing multifamily weatherization. We've always partnered with 3E Thermal, but now we fund 3E Thermal directly to support multifamily weatherization. So we continued that last year. We also, with the Clean Energy Development Fund, continue to install high-efficient wood and pellet stoves. That's funding that they supported us with. We did add a COVID adjustment last year based on the allowable cost per unit. We're seeing some pretty wacky stuff with regard to prices for materials and just some added costs in doing home weatherization given some of the new protocols and approaches that crews needed to take being in people's homes during a pandemic. And then we also made a move to subsidize the first 3 months of new crew employment. So this is in recognition that our program actually provides an incredible amount of training and technical assistance to staff once they join the program. That takes time, and it often takes crew away from the actual doing the actual work in the home. And then a lot of times when they're doing that work in the home, it is a lot of on-the-job training and coaching, and it takes time away from other staff. So in recognition of that, because training, time that staff spend training is not time that we can assign to a particular job or home, right? So we sort of bucket that a little bit differently in our administration of the program. And so now what we say is when one of our providers hires a new crew staff, 100% of the first 3 months of their time is just considered training time, which has really helped us as well.
All right. Can I ask a quick question on that one?
Yep.
Are you finding that you're satisfied with the rate at which the people you train you also retain?
They are satisfied at the rate of retention. I think it can be challenging. Retention is challenging right now for sure. I think we have had some folks in this field and this network who've been doing this work with us for a really long time. Crew retention, and we have a really phenomenal career pathway, right? Like this work, it can start as an installer, and you can kind of work your way up the ladder. We do find our biggest turnover is in crew, and that's so that is a challenge for us as well. You put a lot into training crew to do really tough work, and that is where the highest turnover is. So that is an area we're always working with our network on how to improve as well.
Yep. And one other quick question on the home repair and vermiculite remediation. Those funds are generally exhausted every year. I mean, is that kind of a rate limiting thing in terms of how many, if you had more of that money, could you get to more homes, or is it balanced out so that you have basically as much as you need?
Yeah, so that's a little bit of what you'll hear me talk about is how we've shifted our approach over time. Certainly, historically, that's been the case. We have a certain amount, and that's sort of when that's exhausted, it kind of can prevent homes from being weatherized. But our approach right now is really to have a zero deferral policy and to ensure that we have enough funds appropriated and enough funding from various funding sources to support us in not deferring any homes. So you'll see that as I talk about where we're going, and we budget for the program. That's always a consideration now.
Right. Thank you.
So this year, that was last year, this year, the year that we're currently in, state fiscal year 22, it's about $16.8 million for weatherization. We expect and hope to weatherize 1,300 units this year. That's about a 35% ramp up for us. That's pretty ambitious, and we'll see how we do. We also thank you, the legislature, for your appropriation of ARPA funds. The governor did request ARPA funding for weatherization. And while that ask wasn't fully funded, we did receive $7.9 million in ARPA funds, both ARPA LIHEAP and ARPA SFR funds to spend. The ARPA LIHEAP funds actually end 9/30/23, so those funds have an end date that will creep up on us quickly. And the ARPA SFR funds we are pointing towards use with deferrals, towards installing heat pumps, which is a new thing for our program, continuing the work to install efficient wood stoves, and continuing the work for multifamily weatherization. Between that $7.9 million, which is over the next 2 years, we will expect to add that $7.9 million will support an additional 550 homes to be weatherized. Also this year, we launched a statewide campaign for worker and customer recruitment and outreach. PSAs on WCAX are going to start running really soon. Actually, I just previewed those earlier this week. That's exciting. Our weatherization director, Jeff Wilcox, has been out on the radio. We started an Instagram account. We are doing a lot to get the word out. Historically, it's been that the weatherization program had such a long waiting list, and so we never really did a lot of outreach to our detriment, I think. So a lot of folks don't know about the program, believe it or not, and so we're trying to get out there and build our waiting list. At one point this summer, we're down to next to nothing, and so we have an opportunity as we're scaling up to just get the word out. So we've been doing a lot of that. We also, as we scale up the program, we need to purchase trucks and equipment. I will say truck purchasing has been challenging right in this moment, but we made an investment in those sort of one-time costs. We now officially have 6 weatherization agencies instead of 5. The 3E thermal pilot that we did with the one-time general funds, we consider very successful in helping us to do more, and so we're going to continue that work into the future. We participated in a national wage study around weatherization workforce. That was really important, and sat on that committee and led that. That's leading us to think about wages in the network as well. And then it's been a busy year in terms of policy and weatherization, and I have to go back to say we have a team of 3 for weatherization. I lead a division at OEO, but I lead a division that does much more than weatherization, and so we're stretched to participate in all of these conversations, but we are very much active participants on the Climate Council. My boss, Commissioner Brown, is on the Climate Council. I chaired the Just Transition Subcommittee. We participate to the best of our ability on the EAN Weatherization at Scale Working Group. We also participated in the Workforce Development Group, and then you asked us to lead an Energy Savings Counseling Work Group. So it has been a very busy year for us, and as we look to the future of this work, how we continue to be great collaborators and have the capacity to do that's really important for us.
Well, I'm sorry you're getting stretched in so many ways, but it's a testament to your competence that everyone's asking you to pitch in and help. Thanks.
Absolutely, and we believe this is important work, and as well know that we have full support of the administration in this work as well, as you heard in the State of the State, the importance of weatherization. So where are we going? So I already said this, but we're having a zero deferral policy. This has become critically important, and I think lifted up for us in the equity work of the Climate Council, that if we are going to weatherize homes of the most low-income Vermonters, most rural Vermonters, then that means we're going to weatherize homes that have issues that will prevent us, that those homes are going to have issues that need to be addressed. And addressing that becomes a major equity issue. So this is really that whole home approach that says we got to take care of the home repair issues. We got to take care of vermiculite. No more sort of handoffs and referrals to say, why did you figure it out? We just figure it out now as part of our program, and we ensure that the funding's there to do it. We also now, as part of our standard operating practice, we're moving towards cold climate heat pumps and heat pump water heaters as just part of our standard practice when we're in a home, that's the right time to do that work. Wood stove installation, again. I'll just point out that we've done some work with our partners, and we have the ability to nearly double the size of the program. We believe that's ambitious, but that is what we think we could stretch to do by 2026 with some additional investments, both ARPA, SFR. And then I would say that we are anticipating a major investment from the Department of Energy through the Infrastructure Act that is specifically for the low-income weatherization program. We won't know how much that funding is likely until later this spring. We do know that Congressman Welch, not the Department of Energy, announced that we will be getting near $15 million. So we are waiting for confirmation from the Department of Energy when they announce those awards in the spring, but that's a ballpark figure for us. We also know that funding will be over the course of several years, and we don't know the parameters tied to that. So it's a little hard for us to plan, but sort of that's in the mix there as well.
Well, congratulations. That's great news.
It is good news. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unlike other states, the Department of Energy funding has always represented a very small portion of our funding. And so in other states, that will be particularly challenging for them to grow at the rate that the DOE funding will be. We are also looking at how we increase our what we call our allowable cost per unit, or ACPU, to support wages. And to try to use a market-driven wage standard. So right now, our program has a set sort of average job cost, right? That's what we've historically called that for the whole program. We're sort of driving how much we can do in a home is a little bit sort of, not a little bit, a lot restricted by that. We have a lot of flexibility in how we approach that, right? We use a flexible job cost. I won't get into the technicals around that, but I think one of the things is that can artificially kind of reduce what our programs are paying so that we're not paying a market standard. Now, granted, our programs also provide like full benefit packages and leave time, and it's sort of like a holistic approach, which is phenomenal. But we know that wages also matter, and as part of that national wage study, we're sort of looking at how we could set a market-driven wage standard. So the biggest challenges are crew vacancies. It's really hard to hire. In August, we had a 20% crew vacancy rate. I know that's substantially down at this point. I think it still hovers, though, around 10%. We also have a shortage of subcontractors. So, and then we have material cost increases that we're grappling with as well. These are all challenges within the program. So I just want to talk briefly about sort of that energy equity lens. This feels really important to our work. Obviously, as a low-income home weatherization program, we could sort of stop the conversation and just rest our laurels on the fact that our whole program is meant to address equity. But we think that's not enough. We have to be doing a little bit more to make sure we're really achieving these goals. And the Climate Council really shined a light on that for us. So we're doing some looking at our own data to understand which communities in the state of Vermont we have reached, which demographics we've reached, which ones we haven't reached as well as we need to, and to try and adjust our work to make sure we're reaching those impacted communities. We're really looking at how we continue, and this has always been a goal, but ease access and reduce barriers to entry for the program. Always, and I encourage you all to have this lens as well in your work around energy and weatherization, because it's obviously not just our program, but how do we offset burdens for impacted communities, and how do we maximize benefits for them? I think that kind of lens, if we're always kind of asking that question and in conversation around weatherization, it will lead us down the right path. This is a particularly important one when we're talking about fuel switching, right? And we're talking about how do we ensure that we're not impacting the affordability for people, right? Part of what our program has always done is hopefully decreased energy costs for people, right? And alleviated the energy burden. And as we move forward with some of the goals around the climate plan, I think we always need to be thinking about how we're mitigating the impact of some new approaches. So a whole home approach I mentioned was, from us, an important equity piece. We want to think about how we're creating more opportunities for customer voices to actually shape our work and shape our policies. I think this is a great example where even the EAN group, the coalition, right, around weatherization at scale, I think we need to think more about how we're bringing customer voices and the voices of Vermonters into the conversation. And then workforce. We need jobs with good wages and benefits, but also we need to diversify our workforce, and we need to be talking about that, and we need workforce development strategies that are focused on how to diversify the workforce. I'm going to pause there. The second part is that I think you want me to provide a brief overview of the Energy Savings Counseling Work Group, but this is sort of an update on where the low-income weatherization program's at.
Well, great. Are there any committee questions? Okay, well, thanks for the reminder. It's certainly been a very active year. I do have a question. I don't want to, I think we would like to schedule more time for a deeper conversation, but I would say this committee, perhaps a little bit like your program, we've counted on the fact that we've been trying to be attentive to disadvantaged groups in terms of access to programs. But the Just Transitions work has brought nuance to that conversation, and I think that we need to learn more about. I know, for instance, last spring, as we tried to have conversations in this area, I realized that even the way I was asking the questions, and that we were creating an opportunity to testify via Zoom, to a State House committee, was part of the problem. Our process for building the relationship itself was an unintended problem causer. So maybe I'll just park it there to acknowledge that this is something we know we want to learn more about and do better on, and look forward to talking with you again, particularly because you have both these roles in running this progressive program for a long time, and then you're part of the Climate Council Just Transitions group. So I talked to former Representative Minter during the summer, and she said it was a very eye-opening and thought-provoking conversations that the team was having. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yes. So I will just continue briefly to provide an overview of the Energy Savings Counseling Report. And I appreciate your point, Senator Bray. I think the work that the Just Transitions Committee and the Climate Council has done has certainly said that we haven't done enough, and we need to do more and do better when it comes to equity and engagement. So it has been a great, challenging conversation for us. So you all asked us to chair an Energy Savings Counseling Work Group, and to include the community action agencies, the Weatherization Program specifically, NeighborWorks of Western Vermont, Efficiency Vermont, and others. You asked us that this group, then, that we deliver a plan for coordinating and enhancing energy counseling services to Vermonters. And I have linked the report in here. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, please do. And so that group was convened per the legislation on June 30th by Senator Bray and the committee chair for the House Committee as well, and Representative Briglin. And it met 9 times over 3 months. We had a very abbreviated amount of time to do this work. And we laid out in our report essentially kind of 4 areas. First, we needed to establish an actual definition and goals of what is energy savings counseling. That's not a term of art that's out there. And so we had to come to some agreement on what we meant by that as a starting place. And then we decided that the next thing that we needed to do was kind of understand who's doing this work in Vermont. So kind of do that scan and have some conversations with folks, stakeholders, and folks who are doing that work or are thought to be doing that work. We didn't have a lot of time to engage low and moderate income Vermonters in that conversation of this work, but we did an informal survey, which was actually helpful in terms of us understanding needs and thoughts and value of energy savings counseling. And then we wrapped up the report with some opportunities to move forward with enhancing and coordinating energy counseling services. So in our short time frame, I think we did a lot of great work to kind of lay the foundation for this field. And our sort of working that we use the terms energy counseling and energy coaching, although counseling and coaching are kind of different modalities we ended up using those terms very interchangeably, and we just decided to do that. We created a working definition, knowing that this work is still evolving and it's a pretty new field, so to speak. Fundamentally, energy counselors are about helping people to make decisions about energy and to access resources to both save energy or use cleaner energy. And then, some fundamental things about energy counseling. It's about trusted, unbiased information. That was really driven home to us by our survey of low and moderate income Vermonters, that trusted, unbiased information. That energy counselors are working to understand when someone's personal financial information and energy use, both. That it's about helping people make a plan that fits their needs, goals, and capacity, so it's very individualized. It definitely is about helping people to navigate existing programs and to access those programs, and really about helping people to just take steps to achieve their goals. Fundamentally, energy counseling is about helping people to take individual action, both to save energy and use cleaner energy, both in the short term and over the long term. In our report, we identified sort of 11 opportunities for future action. I just wanted to highlight a few of those here. One is the opportunity to do some targeted services to reach tenants, both through perhaps condo associations or large landlords. And part of this was driven home by our survey of consumers who really, it was very clear that home energy issues are very different for tenants than they are for homeowners, and we haven't, as a field, really approached that work very differently. Also, the role of town energy committees in VCAN, and that there's an opportunity to really improve connection with those on-the-ground champions who, in some cases, do a little bit of energy counseling work, but mostly act as an information and resource referral network. The legislature also appropriated $1.5 million to pilot over the next 3 years an financial and energy coach initiative through the community action agencies. So there's a lot to be learned through the doing of that work, and so that will be important to understand how to best position a specific initiative. Another thing that came up was perhaps the importance of some standards around energy counselors or training. Again, this is driven by the consumer feedback that said we really need people who know what they're doing and we can trust and make it worth my time. And then to think about how to integrate this work with other sectors. So in the survey, I didn't do a specific slide on it, but in the sort of looking at the landscape of who's doing this work already in Vermont, it's very clear that a lot of different organizations already do some variation of energy counseling in their day-to-day work. And a lot of it is really sector-specific. So, of course, Efficiency Vermont does, and in our low-income weatherization program, we have energy coaching. But also utilities are doing some of this work. And also credit unions and financial institutions are doing some of this work. And also the town energy committee folks are sometimes doing some of this work. So it's clear a lot of people are doing this kind of work. And again, the opportunity to bring some standards or some coordination to it definitely exists. We have not planned to reconvene this work group. It had a time-limited specific purpose. It's possible that Capstone Community Action, which is leading the Energy and Financial Coach Initiative work, may continue to convene this group with other stakeholders to think about how to advance this field. So hopefully this, again, just kind of lays the foundation for this ongoing work and understanding its added value. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Great. Well, you got a lot done in 3 months and 9 meetings. And right people in the room. In terms of, so we'll have this is day 1. We'll be digging into weatherization more deeply, but in terms of this committee and work for the coming session, what do you see as the most helpful things that you would want us to work on?
Yeah, I think I'll just reiterate what my other colleagues have said. There's a lot of one-time money that will help us to scale up this work, and then that one-time funding will end. And we can scale up. The question is whether you want us to scale down or whether you want to find additional funding for us to be able to continue that work at that higher level or even a higher level than that. I think also I want you to continue to bring an equity lens to this work and to think about engagement of stakeholders, not just those of us in the room today as stakeholders, but real people in communities and people who would receive weatherization and how to bring their voices into this work. And then I think workforce development is, of course, an issue. We actually, again, I'll just go back to brag on our team. We do a lot of training and technical assistance. If we can hire somebody, we can train you to do the work. That's not a problem for us. It's the pipeline of workers coming into the program that's the biggest challenge for us. And recognize that I think Dan outlined the work of the Workforce Development Group really great. For us, it's never been about the curricula issues, right? But I recognize for the rest of the field, it has been. For us, it's about getting the getting workers to apply, getting people to apply for the program who want to do this work. So I think with all of the other workforce challenges in the state, we can throw oodles and oodles of money at trying to recruit workers in every field. But at the end of the day, we need a strategy that's a little bit more than just that. So we are doing that. We have this recruitment campaign. We are putting some energy into just recruitment, and we need some different approaches around workforce development.
Yeah.
That are about just building the workforce itself. People. We need people who want to do the work. And I think the last thing for us is that when you're thinking about our program and our ability to scale up and the goals of the Climate Council itself, obviously our program plays a really important part of achieving those overall goals. But we're not going to be able to be half of the solution. We're going to need to do this work differently in Vermont than we have done in the past. And so we're a really important part of achieving the Climate Council's goals around weatherization, but we need to have a conversation. I think Neil alluded to this in terms of the work around the technical group. It's maybe not just about the technical group. There's maybe a broader conversation to be had about how are we actually going to achieve those goals in the climate plan that we need to in terms of weatherization. Our program is not going to be able to be half of that. And historically, we have been half of how we do weatherization in the state of Vermont. So just to kind of put that in the mix, I think that's a bigger policy conversation for us all to be engaging in. So, yeah, thanks. Thanks for asking me, Senator Bray.
Well, I hope you always feel like if there is something that we could do that would be helpful, that we're interested in hearing. Maybe we don't ask often enough, but it's a standing offer for sure. I think part of, you alluded to the steadiness of funding, which has been an ongoing theme for years, actually. How do we build something and fund it in a way that people can count on it? And I think for that, towards your last point about having partners, I think that's where we've been hoping that it was as the market builds, as the program builds and the funding is steady, that the private marketplace will then be drawn in to help build out the ranks. And I think the analogy was what happened for instance, on solar development, where the state primed the pump with higher rates, like through feed-in tariffs and standard offer, things like that. And it helped get the private sector up and running and attract people to it as a business proposition, that it would actually be a good business to be in. Okay. Yeah, and the equity lens one, I think, I continue to be sort of troubled by it, but that's okay. That means that I'm going to be highly motivated to learn more and figure out ways to to broaden the way that we take down that work. Any committee questions for Ms. Phillips? Senator McDonald, I've seen you fidgeting, so I know that means there's a question coming.
No, I'm always trying to compare what we're trying to do with other things that are going on simultaneously. When we're talking about plumbers, we don't talk about getting more workers. We talk about getting more plumbers. And this job is a workforce job, not a trade job, and that's just a different challenge. They're both absolutely necessary. One tends to be one person comes, does the job, charges through the roof. You can't export it to India. The other is part of a workforce in which there are people that come on at lower wages and folks who run the show. So that in itself makes it a less attractive job. And we ought to just realize that as as the good work that our witnesses before us are committed to and scrambling like crazy to move forward. But let's not fool ourselves and make analogies that are overly simplified. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, so to that point, let me ask Ms. Phillips, you were alluding to and we talked about this with the work that Mr. Reilly was just doing with that group, the curriculum piece. The concept was, I think, and you alluded to this, that yes, an entry-level position, it might not be the most attractive work all the time, but if you said, well, this is how I start and I get good at this, and then I have an opportunity to move up, and it becomes that's why we started talking about it as a career pathway in green trades, green building trades, that you wouldn't necessarily always be the guy in the attic or the crawl space. And so I don't want us to engage in wishful thinking, but that was kind of the hopeful direction we were moving, that it would become more attractive because people would see it as something beyond just the entry-level position. How is that wishful thinking on our part, or do you see that happening in your teams?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really strong career ladder in this work, in weatherization work and green jobs generally, a really strong career ladder. Obviously, we need more crew staff than we need energy auditors. So, that limits, not everyone can sort of move up the ladder within the year, so to speak. But this field is growing so rapidly that it will open up a lot of opportunities for people to grow quickly within the field. Our weatherization program administrator, Jeff Wilcox, will tell you he got his start swinging hammers, and now he's the director of the statewide program. So I think in fact, we have 3 staff at the weatherization program at OEO, and they all got started swinging hammers. So
we don't swing hammers anymore.
All right, don't
they're
swing hammers.
They're operated with air guns.
Yes, okay, sorry, bad
We don't
metaphor.
spread manure, we spray it.
He might have been swinging hammers back in the day, but fair enough. So I think I'm using a metaphor, obviously, but yes, I think that's right. People got started on crews and worked their way into different positions. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it is, having just been working, doing carpentry all fall and summer, there is a sort of a bear to grin and bear it part, a tough, gritty part of every job. And then what is hard is that that I see in energy work is that you might be doing something that's really sort of grinding, tough work. And then at a certain moment, you need to throw the switch and do very finessed, careful work, because if you don't seal well, then you've just blown all the other work around it. And so it's a challenging thing, the mix of close attention and finesse with also being able to just hoe out a space because it's a wet mess or something like that. All right, well, so this brought us to the top of the hour pretty much. Sorry, Senator McCormick, I forgot.
Yeah, we're at the top of the hour, so I'll try to be brief. I just want to say weatherization is my favorite response to global warming. We have a hierarchy. The global warming is a serious enough problem that if there are things that require a sacrifice, we damn well ought to be willing to do the sacrifice. But there are some things that are no sacrifice at all. Being more comfortable and paying less for your heating is not a sacrifice. So this is probably the most attractive response to, with the possible exception of legalizing clotheslines, where you can get to go outside. But even there, some people regard hanging your clothes up as a sacrifice. I've never heard anyone complain that their house was too comfortable. So.
Senator Westman.
I'd just like to compliment everybody. I think last year when the idea of putting more money into training of the workforce in this area and the work, it wasn't really clear that everybody was on the same page. And it seems like they've all taken it to heart. And what I hear amongst all of the groups, from Efficiency Vermont to all of the groups, is they're working together to train people and move in the same direction. So people in this workforce area can move seamlessly from one area to the other as they're working.
Okay. Right. Well, yeah, I echo Senator Westman's. I mean, I think there is, whenever you're creating a workforce or a team outside the legislatively mandated team, your actual mileage may vary in terms of what happens, and it depends on the individuals who show up. And really, I would second what Senator Westman's saying. People really showed up with their hearts and minds and threw themselves into it, and we've learned a lot. And then it's, I think what we want to be is good partners this session, and then help carry the work forward, because we know this is, you know, we've talked about it as a target a decade out, but we also know that that only gets us towards halfway point in weatherizing homes in the state. So we won't run out of homes to work on, and if we have a successful program, we'll get to more and more people year after year. So,
well, I would just say that we know that there's a number of groups involved, and the what we just heard is the community action agencies can't do you know, all the work alone, or Efficiency Vermont, and they all have different places, but they're all seem to be working together, pulling in the same direction, so there's not duplication, which I think is important.
yeah, great. All right. Well, on that note of appreciation, we'll pause. We have a break scheduled from 10 to 10:30, and then we will go 10:30 to 11:30, at which point we all go to the Senate floor. So this is a physical and mental health break that we're building into the life back in the Zoom world. So see you at 10:30. Just a reminder, folks, we recommend turning off video and microphones during the break.